This is the Cereal at Midnight podcast. Howdy guys, welcome to the Cereal at Midnight podcast. My name is Heath Holland, and in this episode, Matt Patterson returns. This is Matt's second appearance on my channel. In between those two appearances, it's been like 3 years. When he first showed up at Cereal at Midnight for our first interview, first conversation really, less an interview, more a conversation, he was still employed at Warner Brothers, and so there were things that we couldn't talk about. Fun fact, I had to change the name of the episode to avoid... Warner is just strict, man. They're just really strict. I don't know if they still are. This was years ago. There's three CEOs ago, I think is when that was. Since then, in the between times there, I made an appearance on the Archive Guys podcast. So it's Matt Patterson and Daniel Ferranti, aka DW Ferranti. If you listened to the Warner Archive podcast, they were the two of the three co-hosts of that show with George Feltenstein, the maestro of Warner Archive. He's not there anymore. Matt Patterson's not there anymore. And so this is the first time that we're talking here at Cereal at Midnight where he can really just say whatever he wants to say. And we get, so like, I'm going to just, like, I like to tease in these intros, like, this is what you're going to hear, you know. It also prevents you from tuning away, right? I want you to listen to it. Matt's going to talk about what happened with Warner Brothers, which is fascinating to get that on the record. Like, what happened at Warner Brothers? What do you think about it? We're also going to talk about just the business, home media business, and the entertainment business in general. What's been going on for the last few years? Because it's been a rough 3 years, 2.5 to 3 years. It's been rough, not just for the people at Warner Archive and the thousands that lost their jobs there, but just for people in the world, in the entertainment business in general. It's been a hard 3 years. I think that we could all attest to that, like a lot of us, you know, the last 3 years have just been really rough. But let's look at that through the lens of entertainment. I'm going to give you a brief biographical aside on Matt Patterson. So this guy comes from comedy. He was in the 90s. He was part of a comedy team, a comedy troupe that had some really interesting success. And he is the co-author of a book called The Finger, which is about your middle finger, the bird. And so that's who this guy is. You know, he's kind of a satirist, kind of an analytical comedian who's looking at the things that are going on and looking for opportunities to comment on them, which made him kind of perfect for what he was doing at Warner Archive, coming out of film school, which we're going to talk about, and then getting a job at Warner Archive where he's overseeing the home media distribution of thousands of titles, made the company millions of dollars, and then what happened with Warner Brothers happened, and he's no longer there. So we get to talk about all of that. But more importantly, perhaps, is like what has he been doing since he's not at Warner Brothers anymore? Well, he made a movie. He didn't direct it. He produced a movie and has been heavily involved with the creation of this film, Lunamancer, which I'm going to reference you to. It is now available on Amazon Prime. There is physical media coming, including a Blu-ray in a very limited edition VHS. I've seen the movie. I like the movie. It's micro budget and it is weird in the best of ways. We're going to talk all about it in this episode, but this really goes to some interesting places because of Matt's analytical brain and the way that he thinks and the way that he talks about things. This is kind of a tour of the inside of the entertainment industry over the last few years, and I'm just really grateful to him for coming on and talking about this stuff. I always have a great chat with him. Without further ado, Mr. Matt Patterson. I look like I just took a shower because I did just take a shower. So I'm all scrubbed and my hair is wet, but whatever.
Well, I look like there are Santa Ana winds blowing and my hair went flat. And that's because the Santa Ana winds flow. And that means California catches on fire and my hair looks terrible.
No, your hair looks good.
Well, thank you. I feel it doesn't have body right now. And my allergies start to act up. But... and this is the great thing about California, because we have a lot of great names for these things, right? Right now, we're in the Santa Ana winds, and everybody knows what that means. But then the Pineapple Express is coming in, and so next week we're going to get rain. And I'm like, ooh, it's so dramatic.
Yeah, but you'll have good hair, right? You'll have the humidity.
Oh my God. Yeah, I will have Carmen Miranda style hair, but the fruit is my head, not the hat. My head, my hair becomes the hat.
It looks good though. You've always got like indie rocker hair. Like you've always got, that like Gen X rock star hair.
Thank you. Yes, that's because I'm very employable by corporate America. They see this hair and they go, "Oh, that he's a director of media strategy."
He knows what's going on. He knows what's happening.
Yeah, he knows what's happening. That's actually the opposite because when, especially at the end of my time at Warner Brothers, by the way, I'll just mention that I have not been working or paid by Warner Brothers for almost 3 years now. It's like 2.5 years.
I like to say you're employed by Michigan J. Frog, but people, I don't know if the young people know who that is. It's like,
Yeah,
hello, my
young
baby,
people.
hello, my honey. That's the character, the frog character from the Warner Brothers cartoons. But because he like with Disney, he's like, oh, he's paid by the mouse, but Warner Brothers has the frog, right?
Yes.
But you were still employed by Warner Brothers, and you're still at Warner Archive, and there
Yes.
was, let's say, there was a lot of stuff that we had to be careful talking about because
Yes.
of the nature of that employment relationship. Now here you are on the other side of this. It was a crazy, like the whole like 2020. I think there's been two CEOs, two head honchos at Warner Brothers since you were here last time, and a whole lot of people lost their jobs.
Yes.
A lot of good people lost their jobs.
I have just sort of switching to not just entertainment, but entertainment might have been a bellwether, right? Let's talk about like 2020 and beyond.
Uh-huh.
Very similar thing happened and is happening in technology as well, because when people went home and all of a sudden they started using their computers a lot for things like Zoom, as we are doing right now. Zoom stock went up, and the people who worked at Zoom suddenly got rich, and they hired a whole bunch of people, and people started paying subscriptions to Zoom, right? And then that growth ended, and then the way that Wall Street values companies is on green arrow up. When that stops green arrow going up, they're like, how can we make that green arrow keep going up? And then they let everybody go.
Yeah.
And not everybody, but enough people that the products start to change and there isn't as much support. And the same thing can be said, right, for Zoom or Facebook as a company like Warner Brothers in the entertainment industry. And when you start cutting a lot of employees, yes, there's always some people who don't like do anything, but eventually, a good example is like Twitter, right? Because that's been in the news, and
I believe it's called X now.
Yes, exactly. Which is, it's not called Warner Brothers anymore either, right? Not as difficult of a branding shift, but a new owner comes in, changes the brand, lets people go, says it's going to be leaner, and then all of a sudden, in Twitter's case, a year later, the company is suddenly worth half the amount of money. And something similar happened at Warner Brothers. Magic internet money came into the system, and everybody thought, okay, let's grab at it. And so it took a little while. Warner Brothers went up for sale. It was bought by a guy at AT&T who was number 2 at the time, and he couldn't buy Verizon because the government said no. And quite literally, he wanted to put Game of Thrones on a phone, right? And then he bought the company and found out he couldn't really put Game of Thrones on the phone in 7-minute segments because the entertainment industry is more complicated than he realized. And then he decided the company was going to go all in on streaming. 2020 happened, and then they were saddled with debt. So he gave 50% of the company. AT&T still owns 50% of Warner Brothers, and he saddled it with about, I guess, like $40 billion in debt, and gave it to the guy who's currently running it, who's running Discovery. And the plan, as announced by the Hollywood Reporter, at least according to employees who are still there, is that as soon as they legally can, the company is going to be up for sale again to a buyer, perhaps Comcast. It depends, because AT&T wants to get the debt off their books. So I just summarized 7 years of Wall Street for you. Now, how does that play into physical media?
People just tuned back in. They were like, "What? Physical media?"
Yeah.
They were like veering off the road, and they were just like, "Ski."
Well, now I'm backing up a tiny bit. When you start to delve into the business and the history of the business and history of distribution, going back to the beginnings of the entertainment industry, you start finding a counter narrative than how the history of media is normally taught, which is usually like auteur theory, like this great director made this, or this great writer wrote that, right? Author. But it coincides also with technological and business changes and opportunities that people find, so that they make money, right? And then money pushes these things forward. And so streaming is a big deal. However, what the recording industry discovered way back was that when the record industry self-immolated on the pyre of Napster and sort of kind of handed over the business to, at the time, Apple, and then now like Spotify, etc. They could still, and especially artists, could still make money on physical media, right? And as far back as like 2010 or so, when you kind of looked at what was going on, you were like, oh, the movie industry is not very far behind the recording industry. And so the good news always was that the recording industry found a revenue stream among physical media collectors. And I think it was just last year that album sales, right, became one of the largest. It outperformed CDs.
They're talking about vinyl, like the record,
records. And that's because music fans, like that's the equivalent of like a Blu-ray, right, or a 4K. And you can argue that it sounds better or whatever with records, but the record is a tangible object. It brings you, represents the music that you love. It's an album. It has artwork. People just love them, and they are so. I mean, people who collect them, it's not that they're unnecessary, but music on Spotify is like fractional penny cost, right?
Right.
And when you buy an album, it's much greater. But you're supporting the artist, you're supporting the label to support artists, you're supporting a record store, right? It's part of the community. And the other surprising thing that happened more recently is that CD sales have started to go up, because again, people are discovering that owning an object has advantages. And I'm not talking about like collectors. It's like more regular people. Our audience that we're speaking to today is I will call them hardcore collectors, right? I mean, how hardcore are you? But you're anybody who is into.
Some of them are pretty hardcore, man.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking, top percentile, right?
Yeah.
And those, the hardcore collectors' love of the material is the driving beat and the heart of what has actually kept physical media alive. There was a point at Warner Brothers after I left, because they were pushing streaming so hard, they were, and again, I just heard this secondhand, I don't know, but they were not allowed to advertise physical media because they saw it as competition, right? And because they wanted people at that time to get an HBO Max subscription. And there's a logic to that, right? But the illogic is that ancillary revenues have always been a huge part of the business, and by trying to channel everybody into the new and shiny, right? Like there are some people, physical media collectors are a good example, who, you can have a streaming service, but that's not a replacement. That's not a replacement at all.
Right.
And then they, physical media, the release numbers would go down. But the good news is that eventually what happened is, maybe as studios themselves sort of slowed down physical media releases, they licensed a lot more material to third parties. And so now you get this wonderful kind of explosion of indie labels delivering new masters and full of supplemental material, because that's what third parties can bring to the table.
What I would love to see Warner Brothers do, and that they haven't done yet, really, they put some, they'll let Criterion touch some stuff. I think they've let Shout Factory or Shout Studios handle some stuff now, but they still have this massive archive, right? And like George Felsenstein is still there. He's still doing, the work that he can do with whatever team he's got at his disposal. But really, it feels like a trickle when we know that it could be this torrent, and there could be so much coming out. And we see the same thing with Disney too, is Disney has like most of entertainment. You got Warner Brothers and you got Disney, who own most, it seems like, of the history of entertainment, of movies. And they're both like, let's hoard it for the streaming services or for whatever. If they would license to third parties, they could monetize that catalog.
Yes. However, it's not, being there and working for George for over a decade.
Well, hold on. I just one like 15 minutes ago. That's what I wanted to toot your horn. I wanted to be like, you were responsible, like you were part of the team that brought hundreds and hundreds of Blu-rays and DVDs to the market. The restoration, thousands. You marketed those. You were co-hosting the podcast. It was pretty much weekly. Well, it was a regular podcast.
Yeah. We wound up having like 500 or 600 episodes, or 700. I don't know. It was a lot.
It was a lot. You made, I'm going to say, probably millions of dollars of revenue for Warner Brothers.
Sure. Yes.
And you were like, here you go. Bye-bye. You were kind of handed your walking papers, which for me, I was so upset with Warner Brothers when this happened, right? I was so angry that I was like, these are the people that are the lifeblood of this physical, they are, when I have like a Tarzan movie, right, that's on Blu-ray and this nice restaurant, like, that's you guys that were bringing that to reality. And to say, that's not as important to us now as day and date theatrical films on Max or on HBO Max, right? You can go see the new Wonder Woman movie in theaters, but you can also stay home and watch it. I was like, screw you guys, I'm not going to give you any of my money, because
obviously getting let go is tough, but the wonderful thing about corporate America is the people who are running it, and now I call them the Zoomocracy, because it's like 8 people at a Zoom with 30 people watching.
Yeah.
It just if their priority is streaming, then even if, like, we were extremely profitable, right? Like I think the statistic was 92% of our releases made money, right? That's like Roger Corman numbers, but like a Roger Corman style business, while it all added up well and was extremely profitable, it's not sexy, right? It's like and people, especially in entertainment, are attracted to premieres and big opening hits, right? It's a hits, just like also music, right? Or Broadway. It's like a hits business. And so
did you see that memo that was going out? I think it was from Warner. I want to say it was from Zaslav, but they were like, why aren't we leveraging Harry Potter? And it was like, why aren't we leveraging Lord of the Rings? It's like, because those stories are told. Like, you finish those stories. But
I,
it's the allure of that red carpet premiere, right? I'm trying to back up what you're saying.
well, no, but it's red carpet plus catalog, right? Those are catalog is. I mean, well, there are many definitions of catalog. Like at around the 20-year mark, right? That's when a car becomes a classic.
Yeah.
So like we've hit the 20-year mark and coming up to the 20-year marks, on Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings. And so and they now use, because magically people, when you said franchise a long time ago, that meant McDonald's, right? Not a movie.
Right.
But what that is that's just catalog driven sales. And they're like, we have this catalog. Why aren't we monetizing it? And I can tell you from when I was there, is that stuff is monetized every day by home entertainment, by putting Harry Potter on multitudes. Now they put it on a multitude of streaming services. The licensed t-shirts and toys, like they make those things make so much money.
Cash cow.
And Lord of the Rings as well. And while Amazon is making the new Lord of the Rings based off of a series of footnotes, which by the way I enjoy, because it is the Amazon Lord of the Rings, the new TV show, is the best entertainment product based off of footnotes of all time.
And I know you're I know what you're doing, but like, what other footnotes are there for other entertainment properties?
I don't know, but
The Screw Tape, C.S. Lewis's The Screw Tape Letters, the series based on the footnotes. But let me ask you a question. So I'm going to go sideways on that really quick. While you were there, if you can't answer this, I'll cut it out. But like, while you were there, how many people that you encountered in your day-to-day job activities cared about movies, cared about the stuff that they were working on?
Well, like there is, especially among the business people, they didn't want people who were fans, right? Like, and when I say fan, I mean like fans who would let their emotional attachment to products interfere with their ability to do the job. That's kind of what you're taught at business school. And it does make sense, because you have to sometimes make really tough decisions on, not just who are you going to hire, but what are you going to release? What are you going to put resources toward? But the entertainment industry is an opinion industry, right? And no matter how much data you get, which data is really helpful, it's very hard to control for that magic fairy dust thing that creates a Harry Potter or a Star Wars, right? If that were easy, we would have a ton of Star Warses and a ton of Lord of the Rings, but we don't. And that's because properties, I'm going to, step back and say an enduring property like that is rare. They're just rare. But what a studio can do incredibly well is take that property and exploit it. And by exploitation, that means run it through all their channels, like the channel that, I worked on, and like, collectors editions and things. That's one audience, and that's one set of one team. And then there's the t-shirt and clothing, the licensing team. There's the publishing arm. They have a record label. After they sold Warner Brothers Records, they still were like, oh, we have all this other music, what are we going to do with it? So they started another record label. They have a Broadway division that makes money, right? Like, so that's what a studio can do, and that's what Netflix still doesn't have. They don't have all of those things, and they kind of are like, oh, we wish we had that. But again, they're not an old company. and they didn't purchase a legacy media company, like Amazon did, people kind of feared that MGM as it existed would sort of go away once Amazon absorbed it. But when Amazon absorbed like Whole Foods didn't go away. They just, they just saw that now we have this whole other distribution system. And so MGM lives on because the people at Amazon realized all these little parts were already in place in ways that Amazon, they didn't even know that they didn't have them, right? And so you're seeing a lot of MGM branded product come through, and there weren't as many layoffs as people had feared, because it was a very smaller team, but they were performing a function that wasn't being done anywhere else. So I think that's interesting, right?
Yeah.
And so that is so physical media, and literally I think it was yesterday I saw an article, and it was Hollywood Reporter, where they're like, the DVD is dead, long live the DVD. And I think I tweeted a screenshot that said, here we go again, because as their conglomerates, they change their priorities and move stuff around. The old adage that physical media fans have always known is like, when you're holding the thing, you have it. It's like, it's that simple. And more regular people, like Warren, less collectors are starting to realize, like, okay, if I have a copy of this thing, I always know where it's going to be, or that I have it somewhere, at least if they don't have a beautiful shelf. And I don't have to like scramble to see what service it's on, or like it's free on this, but it's $3 on that.
And it can't be edited or modified, because we saw that with the French Connection, right? They took dialogue out of it.
Yeah.
And then they quietly, after the backlash, they just quietly put it back in.
Yeah. That's one of the, now we're going to get into the mystical and weird here, is I always enjoy the fact that there is no perfect movie, right? Like, you can talk about intent, or what the director's intent was, or the producer's intent, whose intent. And when you make a piece of art, like at least a movie or a TV show, there's no perfect version, right? There really is no definitive version, because the script is on paper, the cut is either sitting in an edit bay, right, or in pieces on film, and then when it goes into distribution, other people along the way are making decisions for various reasons, or various benefits or not benefits, to create something. And the most famous and obvious example is Blade Runner, right? What is the definitive version of Blade Runner? Which of these 78 cuts
is there
Blade
a cut
Runner?
called the definitive version? I'm trying to remember.
No, but I mean, that's the point.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist, right? And
Right.
that one is obvious, because people have talked about it, and Warner Brothers released a box set, and when you go to a 35 millimeter screening, sometimes you don't know which one you're going to see, because the prints have been struck at different times, and there might be a little piece in this print or not. And don't even get me started about aspect ratio, or like how something's presented, because sometimes people just shoot it in the camera, and then somebody along the line decides, oh, it's going to be a little square or a big square, or some people know from the very beginning this is how it's supposed to be. And sometimes the people who make those choices initially are like, that's actually kind of the wrong decision. Like, it would be nicer if it wasn't like does this emotional indie movie need to be like, in an like seen through a
Like a
slit?
band-aid, like just a
Yeah.
long narrow
Like,
strip.
does that make it more cinematic? I mean, okay, I guess, but I mean, but I think that sometimes people just make those choices, yeah, without fully considering them. Oh no. Now,
How
okay, I'm gonna go on a tiny tangent. I went to the Getty Museum and I saw a whole floor had a display on the history of frames. And they went through like, and it really got to me because it's something you don't think about. And they're like, yeah, when you put and choose a frame for a painting, uh, it has more impact than one would imagine. And historically, over time, people would take, famous paintings or whatnot and change the frame. And that framing in and of itself has a psychological effect. And so that's the same thing with when you're getting into physical media, packaging, right? Like the packaging affects you sometimes emotionally, right? It gives you an expectation of the film or a memory of the film, and different kinds of packaging. You're like, oh, this one is cooler, and and then there's different presentation at different qualities, and like all that is something that people who go, like deep now, you're like, whoa, what is real? At the end of the day, it's like it, it the choices that filmmakers and studios can make are nearly infinite, right?
Yeah.
And there is uh no one correct way, but maybe, but there is, on a personal level, there's sometimes the way that you like best, and over time that can change because you change through time as a person, and
You know,
that
it
is a reason to revisit movies because you're gonna relate to it differently.
I have I keep butting up against this sometimes, and I'm going to butt up against it again. But I've said, like, I believe, and I think you're confirming it because you're saying the same thing. Our relationship with movies changes. The movies themselves don't change, but our relationship changes as our perspective changes. I see something now at in my 40s that I see it differently than I did at 30 or at 20 because I am not the same person that I was. I keep growing, hopefully, and getting older and having new experiences. That so when people say like, "Well, this is my top 5 movies. It's never changed." I'm like, "Are you watching new movies? Are you putting new information in? Because how could anything stay the same if unless you're staying the same and you're not?" But people will say, "No, my opinion is exactly the same. If I don't like something, I never will like it. If I do like something, I'll always like it." I don't understand how that even works, but these people are out there.
So um there are multiple answers to that, but uh the one that I feel most comfortable with is information overload, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that a lot of people, and especially again, non-super fans, start to put limits on their consumption that are broad categorically. Like, I won't watch a movie from before when I was born
Mm-hmm.
because it has no relevance to me.
Right.
And that's that is untrue because everything from before you were born came before everything after, right? But
Yeah.
but by imposing that limitation, at least when we approach media now, and our choices are nearly limitless, and at least gives you some kind of guardrails so that you're not overwhelmed with the infinite. I mean, it's not infinite now, but
It feels like it sometimes though.
yeah, there's
And let me tell you, like, I don't
more
know
than
that
that.
I don't know if we're wired to put in so much in our heads because one of the benefits of my position at Serial at Midnight is like so much stuff. It's like 100 movies a month. I don't
Yeah.
think we're wired for that. I don't think the human brain is meant to intake that much information. And so I find myself now forgetting a lot of things where I used to would have really connected with it. So there is maybe something to that. Like, don't overload the system overloads, information overload.
When I did the podcast at a certain point, I was watching, oh God, how many movies did we release a month? Something like movies and TV series, it
Yeah.
could be over 30 a month,
Mhm.
right? And that was just for work. That's not right for me. I mean, 100, well, more power to you. But
There's just no way.
but
Really, there's
that's
no way.
but it's hard. But all I
Yeah.
was doing was, I'd work and then I'd come home from work and I'd watch screeners, and and we were marketing the movies and talking about the movies. So, and as a marketer, it was beneficial to see it in a broad sense, because when you're selling a movie, um, the movie is no movie is for everybody, right? It's just not. Even
Right.
Star Wars, right? Like the things that you think would be almost for everybody is it's just not. But even the movie that maybe you personally don't like, there's somebody who's gonna like it. And with the magic of the internet and worldwide distribution, you can connect. You can at least try to connect those few people with the movie or TV show that you have, and they will be happy with it, right? And that's where I think when we were talking earlier about fandom, it's like the opposite way to do it, and the way that I like to approach it was, who would be a fan of this, right? Get into their mindset. There's nothing wrong with being a fan of something. I may not be a fan of it, but I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong for being a fan of it, or even the way that you consume the movie is wrong, right? Like the format. Like if you want to watch it on VHS, great, or project it against the wall silently, fine. If you want the subtitles on, that's how you like it. Good for you. If in like a movie theater, people who are texting and stuff, that can be distracting to other people. Okay,
Right.
now your audience respect is a little different. But I'm of course somebody who has laughed at a movie where nobody else was laughing because I found it humorous, and other audience members get very angry at me because I'm pulling them out of their experience.
Yeah.
And that one's kind of tough, because it's like I was reacting very genuinely, and you're telling me that my reaction is invalid because it invalidates your feeling, right?
Right. Yeah.
But that's a movie, that's a theater, like go, if that bugs you, watch it at home, right? If not everybody enjoys it the same way you do.
Yeah.
Again, it was George Hamilton playing the trumpet. He just looked funny. The guy actually stood up and like got mad at me for laughing, and then I was with my parents and my dad stood up and I'm like, hey everybody, sit down. It is not
Wow.
worth this over George Hamilton. That is a true
Oh.
story. It was so weird.
What was the movie? Do you remember?
um
We'll put it out to the viewers. Like, what was the
i
movie where
I
George
can look
Hamilton
at it.
played the trumpet?
I mean, yeah, I was watching it. This is before I worked at Warner Brothers, and I was taking my parents to the Egyptian theater because now it's Netflix, but I loved programming there, and it's a beautiful theater in Hollywood, and it's a lot of fun to go see. I just love seeing old new movies. I'm a movie omnivore. Woo! Well, what did we learn today?
Well, what we learned is that you've picked up a lot of skills over the years and you're now putting them to work in a different way because you're producing and you're marketing and you have a movie that we
What
want. I
is,
know, right?
is that? Why I'm here?
I don't know. It's almost like that was all just a preamble to the core of this conversation. I want to talk about Lunamancer, and I want to talk about what you've been
Thank you.
working. Like this was a project that you started coming out of your previous time at Warner Brothers at Warner Archive. Um, I will say that I got to see an early cut like
That's
two
right. You
years
did.
ago or something like
Yes.
that. And I really enjoyed it. But talk to me about like how did you get involved producing a movie?
Well, for I don't normally tell the story quite this way, but since I've been on your podcast before and people understand my association with Warner Archive, we I was working with a filmmaker who when we would go to Comic-Cons, it started at first, and then he would shoot stuff for us that we would post online, and then he shot this the Warner Archive 10-year anniversary promotional piece that we released. It's like we wound up going out with a 7-minute cut, but he was a documentary filmmaker. He worked on Icarus, which won an Academy Award, and then he worked on the last Blockbuster, which people who follow physical media may know. He was the cinematographer on that. And while I was still at Warner Archive, after the 10-year anniversary video, I'm like, what are you doing next, Noah? And he told me this plan that he was going to go to upstate New York, live there for a few months, write and shoot a feature film. And I was like, "Ooh, good luck, buddy." And then he came
Hold
back.
on, were you looking for things to get involved with at this point? Were you like, I got to get my fingers in these producing pies?
No. He was a friend, right? And we'd worked together and hit it off. And he really understood what we were doing at Warner Archive, and he's really talented. He put stuff together that not only looked good, but it was fast and super high professional work for a fraction of the price. That's how he got hired. Like the piece that he did, which we couldn't have done if we used a regular vendor. He did it for like a fraction of the cost. So I'm like, yeah, have fun. And he came back and started putting some stuff together, and I'm watching it. And so I started advising him, a little here and there on his journey on forming this just really strange movie, very dreamlike movie, into a solid narrative. And so when the pandemic was happening, and all of a sudden I had some free time, I became the producer, and we did reshoots, we rewrote it, we just really reapproached it and turned this movie that was kind of more of I guess like an art movie with violence into
it's a good description.
A more cohesive 71-minute bizarre magical superhero low budget film. It was really challenging to put together, and required a lot of work in post. And it's like, it wasn't Iron Man, but we went back and just kept at it. And because of the pandemic and movie theaters closing and film festivals closing, it just took a lot longer than we thought. But we wound up coming up with a festival cut, and we ran at festivals for a year. But last year, just as we were coming off our last festival, we had a distributor lined up, but then that deal fell through because of my legal advice. I have lawyers. I know how to deal with them from Warner Brothers. And then we picked up another distributor. But at that point, like a year ago, that was when, Netflix first, it's like, oh, we're really losing money. And all the streaming services stopped buying shows. And then the strikes hit. And so we lost our second distributor because the market in the like 5 or 6 months since the other deal had fallen through, the market had changed. Like there was not much we could do about it. So we got another distributor, and just this week, it finally came out on Amazon Prime, and you can rent it right now for as little as $2 in SD or $3 in HD. But we are also coming out with a Blu-ray because since I know how to do that, why wouldn't I do it? And there are wonderful methods of distributing Blu-rays now through the same company that worked on the Warner Archive discs. They have a great distribution network that really anybody can access and get you placement in major retailers. And we are also releasing, very limited release, a pan and scan 4x3 VHS version for the super collector. But since we did a whole bunch of theatrical, presentations around the country with the festivals, I thought it would be fun to make a very there are VHS stores here in LA. There is a VHS only store called Whammy, and we are arranging to have a screening there, a VHS only screening where we will give away the VHS after the screening.
What?
And it has special VHS art. I have reversible cover on it. Why? Because I'm crazy.
Now you know how the collectors think, though. They got that reversible cover. You're like, I'll get them.
Well, it's also because I'm like, well, I like this design and this design. Oh, it'll get me because I'm like, people can choose. But we even have, depending on how many VHS we have, we even have a VHS box ready to go. If like an actual. I used to make those at the beginning of my movie career. VHS boxes, which is a lost art.
Yeah, it is.
And some of my earliest work was converting VHS art to DVD. And I'm like, darn these long, skinny boxes. They don't fit into a DVD well.
It's funny you say that because, some of these companies do the retro VHS art for their Blu-ray releases. Yeah. And the complaints, like the customer complaints, the fan complaints are like, it's not the same. Why wouldn't they just use the VHS art on the Blu-ray? I'm like, because it's different dimensions, man. Like it's a narrower product. So that's why Mill Creek puts like a tape coming out of the side on the art, and some of the other people will put like a border around it or something. But like it's a different size. You have to make some sort of an adjustment.
We would sometimes pull VHS art that we found and adapt it for DVD release. Because I was good at it. I didn't do all that art. There were different contractors who would do it, but it was fun to adapt VHS art. We would also use it for like newsletters and other things. But the style of the VHS era was very different stylistically, and a lot of retro versions. They put tape around the sides, and they're making and one of and our covers are modern to look retro, but like some of them just are, you got to use a big thick keyframe around the still. The copy is completely different. You have to write 1985-ish copy, which would actually plague us at Warner Brothers because people would be like, oh, you already have copy, and we're like, this is the VHS box copy. You can't use this now, like
meanwhile some of the collectors are like, please use that now, that's what I want.
And again, we were adaptable to circumstances and identify some of that, but it sometimes in a studio production process, it's like slot, like we need text, and it has to be X number of characters. So it's like, okay, what do we have in the database? Does somebody have to write it? I worked with Dan at Warner Archive, and that was one of his jobs, was to rewrite a lot of the, not all of it, but a lot of the box copy, as he would call it, like DVHS it. But sometimes he'd up it, because it's, you just don't want it to sound old, I guess. That's when you're making a VHS, you want it to sound old, so you have to use those the hyperbolic VHS text that it promises you that it's totally worth the $99 that you're spending in 1980.
Is that what you're going to charge for the VHS? You should charge $99.
$99.99. My my boss George would do a funny impression. He worked for a very short amount of time for Menachem Golan, and he said that in the very early days of VHS, he just did this thing where he would say, "George, you have to sell lemon popsicle for $99.99." And I'm like, and Lemon Popsicle was an Israeli American graffiti knockoff movie, which was on the earliest form of streaming Netflix. And that's how I first saw it. Yeah. When Netflix first came out streaming, I got I think the first or the second Roku model, because I was like, I'm already paying for Netflix. And it was so much fun. Anyway, this is
let's dig more into Lunamancer, because I got more questions for you about that.
Absolutely.
Did you have a film so do you have a film school background? I can't remember.
Yes.
You do. Okay, so this is something you wanted, you were headed towards this anyway at some point, right?
Sure. I mean, I never was like, I want to produce micro budget cinema.
Well, what did you want to do? What was your coming out of film school? What did you want to do?
I wanted to do live comedy. And we did. And we started to we actually came out with a book which zoomed to the number 75 on the Amazon Hot 100 at the time, and that book actually opened doors for us, our live comedy stuff, that we started getting called into MTV and and then the meetings at MTV led. I mean, we went to Comedy Central, and then we went. Was this the
Fox. 90s, like 95? What?
99, 2000.
Okay,
like that era, and which was a really it was a different time. But I also pitched that the television show had a website component, and that people would watch videos of comedy on the internet, and that was like,
they'll never do it. What are you talking about?
Like a few years later, when we were still pitching shows, I came out. I went to a meeting with a Palm, or it was a Handspring Trio, and I played one of our comedy videos on it. And I said to all these executives, "This is the future of sketch comedy." And this is before YouTube came out. And they were like, "Yeah, okay, whatever." And then, when I was working at Warner Brothers, I ran into one of those guys at the Starbucks on the lot, and he goes, "Hey everybody, this is the guy who showed us the future."
Hey, that's cool.
Yeah, well, it's because that's being in the right place at the right time is very it was very obvious to me. But what was not obvious to me was to create YouTube.
Well, I think what we've learned about you over our conversations, and what I know about you to be very true, is that you are kind of a big picture. You are looking at the parts, you're looking at every aspect of something, and you're breaking it down. You have a very analytical mind, which made you great at Warner Archive. And I think that made you great as a producer as well. And I was kind of curious how much of that was book learning from school, and how much of that was just on the job experience from Warner Archive, or outside of Warner Archive too, but everything you've picked up over the decades.
Yeah, film school was, I loved it, and my filmmaking skills were not the best, but I liked critical studies, I liked genre studies, and I just loved the history of the media, and so that always lived with me. And so when I moved to LA, I just go to lots of screenings. Like when I was there at the first or the second film noir festival, and I heard Eddie Miller talk about film noir, and I knew film noir from film school, but to hear his take on film noir was really interesting, because he was pushing catalog films, right? Not just the best. And he's like, there's something of value here. And I always like midnight movies and cult films, and I got to meet people like Patton Oswalt, and I went to see a movie with him at the New Beverly, which was terrible, but it was so amazing. I was just exposed to all these great different points of view. I actually went and took a series of writing classes at UCLA Extension School, where I met Dan. I had already known him from somewhere, but I wound up bringing him to Warner Archive because we both took the same science fiction writing class, and we both took it it was like the first writing movie class I had taken. Like, I mean, outside of like undergraduate. And we both took it for the same reasons, because the instructor was the guy who wrote the Lower Decks episode in Next Generation, which at the time was sort of a cult thing, but now Below Decks is like a huge TV show. Like that episode has just lived on, and to be taught genre by working writers was really eye-opening. And I just took a lot of classes like that. And, Cine Family opened up in LA, and they had a different approach. And so when the Warner Archive opportunity came, I was like, okay, I just put all that in a blender, right? And that was material that the larger groups were like, we can't sell these on disc. And for me, again, like holding up the Palm Pilot and being like, this is the future of comedy, I'm like, oh, there's an audience for this, right? But I was a temp, so part of my job was like to help, in the kind of back end, like push this thing forward and form it into the way we did, where we would take this like manufactured on demand business plan and try to reach the customers who wanted the material and would value the material, right? It wasn't just because it's in the catalog doesn't mean it's worthless. And that's something that somebody who is in the hits business doesn't really, it goes against their DNA, right? Because they're like, why wouldn't you want to work on, working with the best? And I'm like, well, that's great, right? But this other stuff also has value. Don't overlook it, right? That was like something I picked up from Eddie Muller. And Eddie is, now he's like all over everything.
He's the czar of noir,
yeah,
is what they call him. Yeah.
I couldn't have better, influences. And Joe Dante with Trailers from Hell, and his experience with Roger Corman. And another project that I've been working on for a few years is actually writing a like comedy drama about working in a movie studio in 1979 and all the different business things, right? Like blockbuster movies were coming, and these little indie film outlets were getting swallowed up. And some of them pivoted to horror, some of them collapsed, and some of them got bought up by movie studios. And Roger Corman personally did a funny thing where he was like, I'm going to make my own Star Wars. And he never did that again. But he was successful, right? But that's where I'm like, okay, that's interesting, right? And that's that sort of turning point, right? From the late 70s to the early 80s, when home video and cable TV and multiplexes, but drive-ins were going away, exploitation theaters were going away. The whole business model was changing, and the industry was scrambling for something new. And the industry survived, right? But there were winners and losers. And that, I think, is reflective of the time that we live in now. So that's that project. But Lunamancer is a weird little sci-fi fantasy film that I don't think could exist in anything but micro budget cinema, because it's very compact, right? It only has a few main characters. They don't talk a lot, but they have rich internal, angry, and sad lives that really do speak like to an audience. There's audiences that really connect to it, and so by now getting it on Amazon, we hope that it also connects. Also, I approached this movie with a lot of good spirit and fun, even though the movie is a little dark. But that's because movies are fun, right? People love horror movies. I mean, they're about murder. Yay, murder, right? This is about, yay, I don't know how to express my feelings, so I'm beating a moon wizard with a crowbar.
You won a couple of awards with it too so far. It's a couple of festival awards. The Philip K. Dick
Philip K. Dick Film Festival. We won like best film. It was called like best Philip K. Dick film. That was the first pandemic film festival we got into, and it was supposed to be at the Museum of the Moving Image, but then in 2021, the next group of like that was after the first set of shots, and then they shut down the theater, and then it showed in front of a theater that seated 30 people in New York, and we were unable to even get a flight out there. But the film did really well. We got some good press, and the festival organizer said like he felt the movie was a little bit about a young Philip K. Dick who's just losing track of what is real and what is not real, because a lot of the movie could be seen as taking place in the mind of the protagonist.
Yeah. It's like a micro budget Michel Gondry kind of a story, it's got this
it does have that,
yeah. And I don't want to put like set expectations where people are like, well, I'm expecting Gondry then, but micro budget, right? Like it's very approachable. It's very I think it's really cool because I told you this like 2 years ago when we first started talking about this. I was like, I see a lot of micro budget stuff and a lot of it's crap because they want to go make a movie and they don't know how to make a movie and they don't know how to tell a story. And so you see a lot of people just walking around doing nothing. This movie has ideas in it. It's got a lot of interesting imagery and it feels like it's about something, even if it's not necessarily telling you what it is actually about.
It does not tell you. It
does not hold your hand.
Yeah. It pushes you away, much like the main character does, because it's mostly told from his perspective, and he's struggling, and you, the viewer, are struggling. There are, because budget, there are a lot of shots of people walking around, but we made sure that there was purpose and intent in it, right? Like this is when you watch thousands of movies, right, of all different budgets, you pick up certain things, and this is what I feel like I really brought to the table, was that everything had to have a purpose, and that allows you that kind of flexibility. Like the purpose isn't like, oh, we got a drone today, so that'll fill up 30 seconds, but it's not, because it's like because it's about living in this post-industrial city that's kind of falling apart, and the characters are falling apart, and some people are stuck, and some people want to flee, and almost like they're fleeing into the world of the supernatural because there's nowhere to go, and we very purposefully limited the film to 71 minutes. And that was because one of the things that I learned from watching so many, especially B movies and old movies, is you can tell a good story in 71 minutes, like real solid. You could either take like a 90-minute movie and compact it, or you can take something like this story, because there isn't a lot of dialogue to it, but you can make it breathe in a way that a short film, it would just be like two guys beating each other, right? Like it'd be like, oh, that's cool. But this, I think, lets it play emotionally.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't wear the audience out either. If this movie was longer, it would be more challenging to approach. It needs to be approachable. It needs to do what it does, and it does it very well. Again, I haven't seen the latest version of this movie. I got to go buy it or can you buy it on Amazon, or do I need to wait? Where can I buy this thing? There we go.
Right now, you can get it on Amazon Prime, and it is TVOD, transactional video on demand, because it's what I call the inexpensive short latte price, or the cup of coffee price. And if it does well, Amazon will put it on Prime sooner rather than later, because that will expand the audience. It will also eventually be on Tubi and hopefully some other places. It was because it is not a traditional sci-fi story. I'm being very frank here. Not a traditional sci-fi or fantasy story. It became hard to sell to larger outlets because it doesn't conform to one genre, right? It's not horror. Horror is if you made a good horror movie, people just there's a market for that. You're like, this is horror. Or like, if it's got spaceships, it's like, oh, this is spaceship or time travel, right? If you have an easy pitch, if you are a low budget filmmaker and you want to make money, I suggest you write directly to a genre, because there's an outlet for you. If you want to be a little arty, it's going to be a little bit of a struggle, because it's hard for programmers to slot you. Philip, if you're familiar with the work of Philip K. Dick, it's his stuff is what he wrote especially is weird. It's weird, and it's about people like just sort of struggling with reality, and then usually toward the end they're like, oh, this science fiction it's actually the future, it's not the 50s, and this little puzzle that I've been doing has been saving us from moon rockets. Like there's always that weird thing at the end where and this follows that. But that's that's a difficult genre, right?
Yeah.
To market. To make it was fun, but marketing is a whole other beast. You see me looking off because I really have had to put my marketing brain on how do you connect it. So that's why I'm an amazing producer.
That's right. Wait, so hold on. So people want the Blu-ray, or they want to get one of those VHS tapes. Do they have to come to a screening, or can they get it somewhere else?
So when they are available, they will be available at I will point to where they are at Lunamancer.com. Okay. I have some press screeners that are ready to go. The fun part about the Blu-ray is that not only do we have a commentary where you can hear us talk for 71 minutes about the film, but we will have the VHS version, and we haven't quite. We have the VHS, and I'm not kidding, we had to order from Amazon the correct cable to get it from the VHS back into the computer, because a lot of these cables just go one way. That I thought was really funny. I was like, so the idea on that is that you will have on the Blu-ray as close to a VHS experience as you can without having a VHS.
Yeah.
Who puts that on a Blu-ray?
Matt Patterson. That's who.
So
all right. I just wanted to make sure we were hitting all the places that we want people to go to check
Lunamancer.com, Amazon Prime.
I think I have one question for you. This is my last question. This is and it's a doozy. This is
all right.
Get ready. It's coming.
All right, here we go.
Where we are right now, is it any easier for a filmmaker or a producer? Is it any easier to create something than it was before, or is it harder to create something now than it's been in the past?
This is the magic of modernity, is that it has never been easier to make something, right? You can make incredible high quality content, and you can get it to anybody practically all over the world almost instantaneously. However, getting people to watch it is just as hard as it's ever been. And then the other challenge is making money on it, right? Because monetization is hard for individual contributors, because the money it goes to, it always seems to historically in capitalism, to top performers. And so who makes the most money at all of this? Actually, not Netflix, YouTube, right? Google makes all the money because they have the most content that they don't have to pay for, right? But they get a piece of every ad, sometimes the whole ad. But that's what comes with the territory, right? Your voice is available for the world. It's just getting them to it. So the challenges are different. We are all working for the algorithm.
I should just end it right there. It's just like it just goes to a black screen, because that's true. That's the scary takeaway, but it's absolutely true.
It's sad but true, and these are the choices that we started making, like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
The algorithm is very powerful, and but it is not. The algorithm has the algorithm's heart in its best interest. It serves itself very well.
Yeah.
Learning to have it help you is the job, right? A lot of what I'm doing now, us talking right now. I mean, obviously, this is human to human connection, and I hope people check out the film. But even if, and this is like weird, right? But even if nobody watches this, right? But it goes up on, well, a few people need to watch it. But if it goes up on the internet and it says Lunamancer, right? That feeds into Google, and that kind of increases its visibility. And then that goes over to Amazon. And then Amazon will be more likely to put the movie in front of somebody in like the recommendation, right? And
Yeah.
that's like, I don't, I would rather convince a human to do it. I'm not comfortable. I mean, I'm doing it. I can also work to help the machine help people find it, right?
Yeah.
But that's the challenge, right? That's a very modern challenge. That's the gatekeeper.
It feels like the algorithm you said the algorithm is serving the algorithm. Grassroots is still, I think, the best way if you can figure out a way to make it happen. If you can connect with, you find your tribe,
Oh yeah. Oh
promote
no
your stuff to your tribe. That
That's
grassroots movement, really, there's no substitution for that. The algorithm
nope.
can't substitute for that.
Nope. And but the and this is my weird like Black Mirror part, right? That's what I'm doing right now, right? I'm talking to people about movies and movie making, which is interesting, and connecting it to my own journey. That's a very personal grassroots way
Yeah.
of marketing, and grassroots marketing does work. But then, right, just like any distributor, right, like the studio or the algorithm or whatever, it will because it is success, if that is successful, it will get picked up and amplified,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
But by the way, if it doesn't, if you look at like Kickstarter and stuff, Discord and Twitch, even the miniature algorithms within that, people make a living off of that kind of work, but it becomes a volume business, right? Like Warner Archive was a volume business. It wasn't one movie. It was, now it's like 5, but it could be up to like 30, movies a month or 20 movies a month. That's a Roger Corman volume business, which allows you to make a living through scale.
That's what I say about YouTube too, is it's a
Yeah,
volume business. Like if I was just
volume.
putting up things I want to talk about, wouldn't be doing very good. You got to feed this machine.
Yeah,
And 3, 4, it will kill you. It will like you like I think the most I did like 17 videos daily in a row, like 17 days in a row, new videos. It just about broke me. And I was like, it's all going up. It's finally going up. I got the green arrows going up. But the human cost to that was too much. So you got to just find a balance to feed this machine while also, because it's a volume business, but also not lose yourself in the process.
lose yourself in the process. And very early on with social media, I'm going to sound old when I say young people, but I'd see young people throwing themselves into it, and I'm like, this, you don't lose yourself, because who you are is more important, and you can always, work off of you. You still have to live with you at the end of the day, and your voice, your opinions, your point of view is what the algorithm is feeding off of. And by the way, and this is why I do not have 1 million followers, but the whatever the algorithm is at the time will push you toward what it thinks you should be doing and reward you, training you like a dog or a human. I mean, we're all trainable, but now you're not the boss, But hey, you could be making money, right? It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
But hey, that's media, like that's where we live. But
I'm living that. I'm living that every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you could make a movie on a phone, right? You couldn't do
Yeah.
that before. I mean, like, you have a professional camera in your pocket for like a few $100. Like, that's amazing. And it will publish. You can edit. A thing that you can hold in your hand is like the Gutenberg printing press times 10 million. Like, it's so powerful. But with great power comes great responsibility.
And great competition too, because you're competing with everybody else with a computer in their pocket.
Everybody, right? And that's it's exciting. So I yay.
Where do you want people to go follow you? You want to shout out your social media?
Yeah. Well, at Mr. Matt Patterson is Instagram and Twitter, which I still call Twitter because I'm the person who will call it Twitter for 20 years. And you can follow Lunamancer at Lunamancer Movie. It doesn't have a huge following on Twitter, and it's Lunamancer 2023 on Instagram.
Very good. Anything else you want to talk about before we ride off into the sunset?
I'm going to save that for next time. I have so many things.
Okay.
Come back. Things.
Yeah, come back and let's pick it up where we left off.
Yeah. If we haven't exhausted people at this point, then they can tune back in.
There you go. And to be continued. So listen, stick around. I'm going to say goodbye to you after we record, but after we finish recording. But it's always a joy to talk to you. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Bye. Oh, there you have it. You have looked into the mind of Matt Patterson, and we are awestruck. I have so much I really respect Matt Patterson. I think that he is probably a genius. I think that the way that he thinks about things is uncommon. He's looking at big pictures. He understands trends. And so if you like what you've heard here, first of all, do check out Lunamancer, because one, independent creators, right? Two, micro budget. So it's an alternative to that big $300 million thing. And you heard in the interview that it's easier than ever to create. It's harder than ever to get your stuff seen. And that's the problem. Listen, I experienced that here with Cereal at Midnight, which is why I'm constantly asking you to rate, review, subscribe, give thumbs ups, do whatever you can to support Cereal at Midnight and to support indie creators. Because listen, I'm working on this stuff like pretty much 24/7. This is all I do. I wake up thinking about Cereal at Midnight. I go to bed thinking about Cereal at Midnight. I go to bed with my to-do list in my head for the next day. So that's support, and I'm competing with channels that have 3 million subscribers, and YouTube actively wants to promote those channels, right? Because they are making Google a lot of money. This is a corporate business. It's a shame that every platform that we have that helps to distribute stuff is a corporate platform that is in the best interest of that corporation to maximize revenue off of that. And that's how certain smaller creators get squashed. But again, remember to do all of the things with the thumbs and the ups, with the subscribing, with the sharing and the telling of the people of the thing that you heard so that others can discover it too. Really, whatever you can do to support Cereal at Midnight. YouTube memberships is a thing now. For $5 you can unlock exclusive videos, and you're helping to promote what Cereal at Midnight does, because I don't do sponsorships. I don't do ad reads for things. I do not sell mattresses or stamps or cereal. You think that a cereal sponsorship would be in the cards, but I've said no to those because they want too much information about you, and I think it's kind of creepy. I don't want to sell you out to a corporation looking to target market things to you based on your age and your demographic and your race and your gender and all that stuff. That's none of anybody's business. I will not sell that, right? So here we are. It's you and it's me. Whatever you can do to support Cereal at Midnight, I appreciate it. Do head over, check out the Archive Guys podcast, Mr. Matt Patterson on social media. Thanks again to Matt Patterson. Thanks to you guys. I appreciate you. Till next time, I will catch you later.